In this video, we are going to check out navigation. This allows us to navigate from one page to another. So for example, well, depending on which button I click, you can see I'm moving between different pages, and this allows me to navigate from one screen to another. And that is going to be generally important if you have a multi-screen application or you need to build one. We're going to look into navigation a lot more in the next videos as well. So this is just the initial start to get a feeling for how navigation works directly in C# and WPF. Okay, therefore, let's go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call this one Simple Navigation Demo. It will be a WPF app with the .NET framework. So here, Navigation Demo, and maybe something like Simple Navigation Demo, because we're going to create a more complex one later on. So the first thing that we are going to do is to have a frame inside of our grid. The default panel that we have here is a grid, and I want to use a frame because a frame is going to hold our pages. So a frame is generally the UI element that you would use that you want to display your pages in. Okay, it's the parent of pages. It's not the window that will be the parent of pages, but we're going to use pages to display them in the frame, and the idea is that this frame will basically just change its content to display either page 1 or page 2. And the advantage of using pages over, well, basically windows is the fact that you don't create an extra window each time that you're making a change. You're staying in the same window, and at the same time you have a backstack which allows you to move back a page and so forth. All of that is handled by WPF in a rather easy to use manner. And therefore, in order to make sure that I can actually move between different pages, I'm going to set up this grid to have 2 rows. The first row will just have the buttons. Okay, so I'm going to use this grid here with row definitions. So we have 2 row definitions. The first row will have 40 pixels and the second one will take the rest of the available space. And then I'm going to use a stack panel in here, which will contain these 2 page buttons next to each other. Okay, so we have button 1 with a click event and button 2 with a click event. So we have 2 different buttons here. We can create event handlers for those in our main window code behind. So here, this one will be for button click 2, and I'm going to create another one for button click 1. Okay, so this one will send us to page 1. This one will send us to page 2. Okay, now let's go over to our frame. Our frame will be in the second row. So let's add the grid row here of 1. And I'm going to set the navigation UI visibility to hidden. Okay, this will basically allow us to display navigation UI visibility, which means a back button and so forth. So I'm going to make them hidden for now. And I'm going to give this frame a name so that I can access it in my code behind. So I'm going to call this one main window frame. And now I will be able to use it inside of my code behind. Okay, now of course, in order to display any of that, we will need to have pages. Okay, and therefore I'm going to create a new folder here because it's always good to separate your elements accordingly. So here I want to put all of my pages in here. Okay, and if you add a new item here, you can select different kind of objects. Okay, so here, for example, there is this WPF page, and this is what we're going to use here. Okay, so I'm going to create a page. It's going to be conveniently called page 1. And this will now be a page that can contain a bunch of content itself. Okay, and the only thing that I'm going to put in here is going to be a label that is going to be saying this is page 1. Super simple label. Really not much going on there. Okay, and then I'm going to create another page. So let's add a new item here, which will be my page 2. Let me add that as well. And this one will say this is page 2. Okay, so here we're really focusing on the navigation aspect of things. We don't really care too much about the design, the beauty of our UI and all of that. We're not going to make it too pretty. Okay, it's really just about the main idea of moving between pages or from one page to another. All right, and now let's go to our main window XAML because that's where the magic is going to happen, where we're going to take care of the different pages. And therefore, I'm going to create objects of my pages. So on page 1 object, I'm going to call this one first page, and a page 2 object, which I'm going to call second page, like so. And in order to use page 1 and page 2, we need to add the namespace. So here, using simple navigation demo pages, because it's in a subfolder, we need to add this line here in order to have access to the classes of the subfolder. And in this case, it's the page 1 and page 2 class, or even XAML files. Okay, so now in the main window constructor, so in here, that's where we would initialize those pages. Okay, so first page will just be a new page 1. Okay, nothing too fancy here. And the second page will just be a new page 2. Okay, so this will just create pages for us. And now the idea is that once we click on this button, click 1, it will set the main window frame content to be my first page. And now the second page will basically do the same thing. So once we click on this button, click 2, we will just go to the second page. Okay, like so. So what is this main window frame content? Well, let's click on it and it will jump here. So by pressing Control and clicking on it, it will jump you to where the definition of that frame is, or of that object. In this case, it's a frame. So we gave it this name of main window frame so that we can access it in the code behind. So now what we're doing is we're setting its content to be a page. And that is generally what the frame wants. So a frame wants to have a page. Now let's run this application. It should already work pretty much. So here we can click here. It will send us to page 1. There we are. And now this will send us to page 2 once we click on it. And there we are. Okay, so we are actually on different pages. And in order to make this even clearer, what we can do is in page 2, let's actually use a stack panel so that it's a little easier to see what's going on. And here we're going to use a button, click me. And then in page 1, let's also use a stack panel. And here we're going to use an image view. So that means we need a source. And I'm going to use my Homer as always, which is going to be this source here. Okay, that will be my Homer. And let me change the height to something like 300 or so. This will make Homer a little smaller. And now let's run this again. And now let's go to page 1. We can see we have Homer on page 1. Let's go to page 2 and we see we have this button that says click me. Okay, so that was part 1 of the navigation chapter. Now let's go over to the next part, in which we're going to go back and forth. So where we can go back in the stack, basically going to the page that we were at before and forward to the page that we were at after, so to speak. Okay, so see you in the next video.